Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma231 here, back in day, talk about Oshi, chapter number 137. This chapter is titled Idol, which I said this exact same thing for last chapter whenever we had a chapter titled Fight, right? Because that is like such an uncharacteristic name for an Oshi chapter. I mean, yes, it is a seinen sort of, not quite like an action, but more of an emotional drama series in a way, so yes. Fights are part of drama, so it makes sense. But here, this whole series is literally about idols and acting culture with that. So this is just funny as hell to me to have a chapter actually titled Idol 137 chapters in, because I wouldn't be surprised if this is like a chapter title that's been reused like 5 times at this point, because it's just so ultra specific to it, right? So it's just really funny to me personally. But, of course, this is a very interesting Oshi chapter, in my opinion, and honestly, probably one of my favorites in a while. Last time there was the whole conflict where they finally filmed the scene for the 15-year lie between Nino and Ai, who, of course, are being played by their counterparts in the future, Nino and Ruby. And at the very end, we saw that Kana had sort of gone off on her big deal of, nobody likes UI, like, it's terrible, right? And at the end, Ruby, as we will get in the beginning of this chapter, we formed an ad-lib, right? And took a jar of, like, some jelly or paste she was eating, threw it at a wall, and watched it shatter as she just, like, cried and screamed at the end of the chapter, right? And it was a very, actually, emotionally charged moment, so it was very nice to see. But we fully start off this chapter again, chapter number 137, Idol, with Ruby just standing there looking all freaked out. Like, we see the tears are still welling up in her eyes, and she does have both of the Dark Starringons activated. And she's sort of standing there, and we see that everybody around her unanimously is just, like, thinking, like, okay, Ruby just did an ad-lib there. Like, that is actually a pretty big deal. As we cut over to see where Director Gotonda is standing, obviously looking at this, and we see the screen cap guy, the guy who was going to end the scene last time. And of course, Gotonda told him to not stop it. So that guy sort of going over to Gotonda, and he's like, hey, director, I mean, what are we supposed to do now? And he's just like, if you let Ruby carry through with that acting image, and that will, like, smash Ai's image of being a strong and perfect person all around, right? And he's like, if we end up keeping that in the story will change 100% completely. Like, we can't do this, right? But through this, Gotonda is completely silent as we cut over to a lot more of the staff, as we see, like, the script writers, and they're looking through the script and then looking up at, like, what Ruby's performance just did. We also see, like, the grip guys who have the big microphone, they're catching audio, sort of standing there. And we also just see many more members of production just standing around, as they're all just sort of thinking the same thing, like, no, like, this is wrong. This isn't I. And we also go over to where Mimcho is standing, of course, in the attire of whatever member she's supposed to be playing. I totally forget. But, like, she's thinking everybody else is like, the I inside me never cried like this, but her power of persuasion is just too much. As we also go over to see where Miyako is standing along with Big Boss guy, Saito. What did I call him before? I don't know. It's Saito's there, right? But we eventually cut back over to Gotonda, where he's sort of sitting crouched against a wall at this point, and he sort of just has both of his hands sort of folded and just, like, covering over his mouth, just, like, in a state of thought. I mean, this really reminds me of Shinji's father from Evangelion, just like that classic scene of just pondering, of just sitting there with the hands just under the nose or just over the nose, just, like, covering up the mouth and everything. It's pretty much that same image, but just with Gotonda being a lot more poor, sitting on the ground with, like, his hands folded, right? It's a very awesome image. But as it starts to happen, we get into a lot of narration. It's about, like, 5 to 6 whole pages of narration, as we just get this idea that sometimes acting is eloquent. And it just continues saying, and Ruby's acting spoke eloquently in this moment. Ai Hoshino was a normal girl that you could have found everywhere. She can neither love nor trust people. She was also very timid and sensitive, and she got hurt after being at odds with her friends. She was really an ordinary girl you could find anywhere. Again, this is just like reinforcing that whole mantra of, I was really just nobody special to begin with, right? She sort of got her, I guess, power is the way I'm going to phrase this, but her acting ability and her idol power sort of came more naturally to her than some others, but she was just still a regular person, right? It's like somebody who has to practice a bit more to get good at like a sport like swimming or golf, but some people just can sometimes intuitively get it on like the first hit or like the first stroke into water, right? So some people can just get it a bit better, and I was just one of them. And because she sort of had that edge in a certain way, and her family treated her like the way they did, so she sort of had that way where she couldn't love or trust anyone, it sort of broke down to her where she was good at this, so her friends didn't like her, and of course with Nino. And as it said in that last little segment, she got hurt after being at odds with her friends. Like, yeah, of course she was hurt by that. I think anyone would be hurt by that. But let's continue on with the narration. We just get more to say, and that's why she lied. A lie that big concealed her weak self completely. She always smiled, and she never showed any negative emotions. She was beautiful and pure. She loved everyone deeply, regardless of their character, and would never betray any of them. And she was like a pet that everyone loved. Now, sort of just to go through some of the imagery during this whole thing, we sort of get a very interesting image here on page, I don't know, I've got to count, 1, 2, 3, 4. On page 4 of like a TV screen, right? And it's obviously like an old CRT, so like the lines going through it and like the refresh rate sort of just progressing down in a way. But we just see like a happy Ai Hoshino just like smiling on the monitor. Obviously, like, yeah, she always smiled in front of everybody, and as it said, like, she never showed any negative emotions, as we see her taking off her Biko Nahachi dress, and it's all, like, just bloodied away, probably from that whole idea of, like, she just threw that jelly or paste or whatever on the wall. And then the other big thing I want to talk about here is, like, it says that she loved everyone deeply, regardless of their character, and never betray them. As we see some of her fans who probably aren't in, like, the best shape, like, they're missing a few teeth, and they're just still cheering for Ai, and like, yeah, that was Ai's character, to love everybody, so, I mean, that's why people gravitate to her so much, right? And as the narration continues on here, it just says that Ai Hoshino was turned into an idol by beings that seem to contain the ugly desires of such people. And we sort of just see an image here of Ai sort of holding her head against the wall, just like with that classic just smiley poker face, and as she's sort of leaning against it, we just see that her eyes and like those Stargons are just shining so bright in the face of everything sort of going wrong with her, right? But we get more narration sort of cutting us back to the present, as it just says that Ruby's eyes said it all. It says, "You all around me here are the ones who made Mama into such an idol. Her parents, the adults around her, and even her friends. They all combined at Ai's talent, character, and real human nature together. They didn't treat her like a person with a heart, and they gave up on understanding, and that's just how she was." And it just says that it was all our fault for not accepting the existence of the individual named Ai Hoshino. Now, this gets into like a lot of more like a meta territory, I sort of think. I still do like the message here, but of course we know that, like, whenever it says like that, Ruby's eyes said it all, that everyone around you were the guys who made Mama into such an idol. That makes a lot of sense. Like, it's looking at all the people around her who obviously just went over to Ai and said, like, "Oh man, you're an amazing idol, and this is why we love you, and you're just such a great performer, like, everybody loves you," right? It's obviously these people that did that, but of course we know that characters like, I'm hesitant to say, like, Director Gontonda, but of course, Saito and Miyako, they obviously had a kind heart for, or at least Saito did, that back in that past, Miyako wasn't really that big of a character. I mean, yes, she did care for Ai, but not as much, of course, Saito did, and of course, her children at the time, but yes. The whole message here is that, yes, while some people probably did give her the time of day that she deserved, there were a lot that pretty much just said, like, hey, you're great at this, you're going to do this, and we're going to sort of mold you into this being an idol with this careless poker face who we don't care about their feelings, right? A very interesting panel I see with this is we see Kana, who is of course still dressed up with Nino here, is peering around a corner and looking at Ruby, who is obviously just standing here in full dismay, right? Another just amazing visual. And yeah, I do like the message, but I just don't think it works out perfectly, but it definitely gets across the point that Oshinoko has been trying to get across for the past, probably this arc mainly, that Hi Oshino is just a regular person, right? Like, just me and you, like, but she just had this ability to do something that not a lot of others could, and that sort of made her spin out of control in a way. But eventually, as all of this happens, we see the director Gontonda finally steps up, and he puts a shoulder on the producer guy from before, and he's eventually like, oh yeah, cut. As we see the scene finally cuts down, and we see that everybody in the studio has sort of moved off for a while, as we see that after this, acting has sort of stopped, and filming has sort of ceased production for a minute while everybody figures out what the hell just happened. And we see director Gontonda is sitting in meetings with a lot of the scriptwriters and everybody. And one of these scriptwriters is just like, wait, well, what should we do? At this rate, like, Ai's character, like, what are we supposed to do here, man? And we also see that another writer's just like, and not to mention all the connections to future plot twists, like, this doesn't work, right? But we see that Gontonda is just in deep thought, and he's just like, well, what was contained in that 15-second ad-lib there, where Ai's heartbreaking scream and her daughter's piercing anger? As he just stands up and he's like, well, they're all connected, right? And he's like, if anything, that scene helped us understand the reason why I was so strong. And Gontonda just says, like, alright, well, we'll just tweak the script for later. And all these writers are just, like, irate. They're just like, what are you talking about? Like, don't be absurd. Like, is it stupid? Like, come on now, man. But as they're all here, we eventually cut over to Saito, as we see that he's walking around, and he eventually walks up next to producer Kaburagi. And Kaburagi's like, oh, hey there, Manager Ichigo, which, yeah, his first name's Ichigo, and I guess, technically, he is still a manager, so, but he's Saito to me. He'll always be Saito in my heart. But we see that Kaburagi's like, so, hey, Saito, what'd you think of Ruby's acting there? And Saito's like, well, she still has definitely a long way to go. And he says, the loneliness that I was hiding in her heart was honestly probably a lot more. And Kaburagi just says, like, yeah, I have to agree with you there. I think so, too. But he just says, like, after that, like, but it's actually great now that she's able to perform in the same direction as I. And he just says that was the most important thing in this movie, after all, was casting a lead female who could act out Ai's emotions, and Ruby was probably the best choice here. But as he sort of says that, he also just says that, but what also probably brought that out of her was definitely Kana's acting. And Kaburagi, of course, says this whole idea that she is a very handy actor to have around, and not only does she have the ability to improve herself, but she can also lift up this true strength in those around her. As Kaburagi just says, like, she just needs to be more popular, then when she does, she will be a truly perfect actor. Beside of this, just, like, it takes in everything Kaburagi says here, but just, like, rebuttals him just, like, I also think she has a lot of potential, but she lacks opportunity, right? As we see that Kaburagi just turns around to Saito and is like, well, here's the thing. I actually have a proposal regarding how to sell Kana a Maria, right? And Saito's like, oh, okay. And, of course, this Kaburagi just says, we should sell her as a genius actor. Which, wasn't this what they were doing before, in a way? Like, of course, we know the whole thing of Kana is that she was popular when she was young, and then as she started to grow up more, she wasn't getting as many acting jobs, and she was just known as a genius child actor. But sort of see us move into she is a genius actor herself. Okay, again, I'm not the biggest fan of Kana, so I, like, really don't care too much here, but that's an interesting proposal there. But at this point of the chapter, we cut outside where they are filming the 15-Year Lie, Presumably, it is the end of filming, or they just ceased filming production. We honestly don't know after the whole ad-lib scenario that Ruby pulled off there. But as we walk out, we see that Kana is, of course, leaving the area and is walking down the side of the building. And as she's walking down, she notices Ruby, who is standing in front of her, just along the side, right? And as Kana gets close, Ruby sort of just looks over and just like, hey, Kana, how is my acting today, right? And Kana sort of looks down and she just says, like, well, the fact that you're acting, let me rephrase that. Kana just says, like, the fact that you are new to acting, your acting was really good today, right? And she just says, like, the emotion was very plain in a way, but it did feel like genuine, true emotion there. And Ruby's just like, oh yeah, I mean, I was actually really angry and all, right? And she says, the way you behaved to me made me understand the depths of human psychology. Golly, Corbin, you need to be able to say words correctly, right? Psychology, that is the word. But she just continues saying, like, I guess you could say that it's just my human nature. And she's just like, or maybe humans' human nature in general. As she just says, like, whenever something unpleasant happens to humans, they just feel sad at first, but then they just also get gradually angry, right? And we get, like, a little more of a comedic panel here with Ruby saying this, and Kana sort of saying back, like, what a shallow understanding of human nature you have there, Ruby, right? But Kana's just like, hey, try to notice things a little bit deeper next time, Ruby, right? And Ruby's just like, well, thanks to that, I feel like I could understand my mama's feelings a bit more. And she says, when my friends treat me badly, I feel sad and angry because I want to understand how they're feeling, right? And she says, I've been trying hard to be an idol like my mama, but I think it's actually wrong. And she says, Mama and I are different people. I want to get along with my friends, and I want to be honest with my own feelings. I will be a star in my way. I won't be like Mama. And, oh my gosh, this is, I think, what makes this chapter an amazing chapter. I mean, everything at the beginning of the chapter of the Gontona stuff and the stuff inside a production studio, I really like almost all of it. But this final conviction that Ruby is finally coming to 137 chapters into the series of maybe I don't have to follow in my mom's footsteps, be an idol exactly the way she was. She bottled up everything she was always feeling. But myself, I don't think that's how I should do it. And oh my, this is just such an amazing message. Like, 10 out of 10. Kaz here. Like, I just love this. Just Ruby's new conviction here. It is just amazing, right? But of course, Kana's standing here, and Kana looks over to Ruby, and she's just like, oh, I see. Isn't that nice? And as she's saying this, Ruby just sort of gets over and sort of like hushes her by putting a finger to her mouth, as she's just like, hey, that's why, unlike her, I won't give up on my friends. Whether or not you quit becoming a Hachi or annoy me, I'll still follow you persistently, so get ready, Kana, right? And Kana just looks over to Ruby as Ruby sort of like pouts off and walks away in a way. And we sort of see that Kana's like, oh man, good grief. It looks like I was actually worried for nothing. And that is where we end off this chapter. This does feel a little like segued in, just like, okay, Ruby and Kana are friends again, right? Simple as that. It's all done. But honestly, I saw a lot of people initially complaining about this whenever this chapter first came out, but the more I think about it and look at it, I actually like this more because we get Kana's whole idea, or not Kana, Ruby's whole idea of, hey, I'm not going to be like my mom, I'm going to be my own person and live life and be an idol a different way than she would be. And to then see Kana come back or Ruby to come back through to Kana and just say like, hey, and that means I'm not giving up on you. It is actually amazing, but also like Kana's nature to just like repay that debt even though she was so angry earlier. That is the one part that feels a bit weird, is Kana's role in this. But again, just an amazing chapter. I feel like I went through everything I wanted to. Just solid chapter. I'd probably go say this is my favorite Oshi no Ko chapter since I've been covering chapters on the channel, which I've been doing now for about a little over 25 chapters. So this one was definitely awesome and amazing. But with that, I really don't have too much up to say for this video. Of course, I was Glowplasma231. I have plenty of other videos on the channel. Some are related to Oshi no Ko, so if you ended up liking this video, hope you won't mind going and checking out some of those other Oshi no Ko videos. Some are definitely worse, I can tell you that much, and some of them are definitely better. So go check out those. I highly implore you to. And yeah, if you did end up liking this video, hope you don't mind leaving a comment down below or hitting the subscribe button or anything. Just those few things really help me out, but I don't have anything else to say. This was an amazing Oshi no Ko chapter, again, number 137, titled Idol, which I guess that title comes from the whole idea that Ruby's going to be her own new idol now, but whatever. We're not getting too far into that right now, but with that, I don't have too much else to say. And yeah, this will be Glowplasma231.